Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Unsecurity Podcast, episode 185 today. I'm Oscar Minks and joined today by Brad Nye. Hey, Brad, how's it going?
It's going good. Try not to melt out here.
Yeah, you guys are in the middle of a heat wave.
It's a bit warm. It was 96 yesterday. It's like 92, 93 today. That's it's a little
Yeah,
steamy.
yeah, it's a little steamy for sure. Enjoy it though, because you're in Minnesota, and I'm sure in like 3 months, right? It's going to be time
Yeah,
for winter to move back in again.
I mean, just because like 6 months ago it was like 20 below.
Yeah, yeah,
Nice little 120-degree swing.
yeah. It's pretty gnarly. My first, I think you know this, but like my first visit to Minnesota was like I don't know, -30. Does it even matter when it gets that
Yeah,
cold, right? it was
the funny.
negative something.
No, I clearly remember that because they actually canceled schools. My kids were home because the high temperature that week didn't get above -20, and
Yeah,
the wind chills during the day were like -35, and at night were like -50. Yeah,
yeah,
well,
yeah,
welcome to Minnesota.
yeah, yeah. It was my first time in Minnesota, and on top of that, it'd been so cold. There was a snowstorm when I
Mhm.
arrived, and so I land at the airport. I go get a rental car. They give me a Toyota Corolla and like a Blizzard. I'm like, "Are you sure? Like I should be driving?" And they're like, "Yeah, you'll be fine. Just follow the taillights in front of you and keep a safe distance." I'm like, "Okay." So I
Yeah.
drove to Minnetonka from there, and that was like the longest 15-mile drive of my life.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, you're like, I'll take the job, but I am not moving.
Yeah, yeah, too cold for me up here. Yeah, it's full summertime down here. It's I think you guys are actually a little hotter than we are right now. I don't even know what it is outside today. It's been consistently like mid upper 80s and
Yeah,
actually pretty nice.
yeah, that's not too bad.
Yeah. Well, cool. Let's get into it then. I've got a couple of news stories to talk about, and then we'll get into our main topic today, which everybody always asks us for, like, what's the one thing I should do, or what's the quick wins I need, and we're big here at helping folks understand that there's no such thing as easy button security,
Right.
and we'll continue to deliver that same message. But we did decide today to curate some things that you could do right away that should help your information security posture. And so we'll talk through some of those tactics and tips and all those good things for everybody. But first, some news. I'll start. There was an article. It was on the Hacker News, and we'll try to get this link up on our blog like we did last week. There's a study. It was a CISO survey of small security teams, and Sonnet put this study together. Just thought this may be an interesting read for some of our listeners. The big key things, the key takeaway that we learned from this article is that remote work really changed things, and we all knew that, right? But now we're
Right.
starting to see some studies and some surveys that's really putting those things into statistics and metrics so we can understand them a little bit more. One key thing is we saw the remote workforce pushed an accelerated use of EDR technologies.
Hmm.
And then, thus, in return, because of that, we're seeing there's a lot of chatter amongst CISOs about how that overlapping of their tools is a pain point. They have a really big challenge in actually managing the tools that they're deploying.
Yeah.
And because of this kind of tooling overload that we've seen in the last couple of years. And really, I mean, it's been forever. Everybody's trying to sell you their easy button security and why their tool fixes everything. Now CISOs are starting to learn that their biggest pain point is they have information overload, they have overlapping tools. They really don't know how to use the tools that they have. And so 96% of the CISOs that were surveyed said they're planning to consolidate their security platforms. And so I thought that was a really interesting,
Yeah.
yeah,
You
find.
know, what's interesting is yes, consolidation, great, that's fine, but you
Mm-hmm.
do you do lose some of that defense in depth. But one thing I kind of took from that point is maybe they should. Are they logging stuff? Why don't they have a central point where they can
Mm-hmm.
see all their alerts? Why are they worried about seeing alerts in three different places?
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of CISOs have learned, right?
Yeah,
Is that they've deployed all these new technologies to their stack, and I think a lot of it was in response to going to a remote workforce.
yeah,
And now they say, "Oh my gosh, I don't have any way to centrally manage and ingest all this information," and
yeah.
thus
Survival mode.
more, yeah, survival mode. and more things are getting ignored because of that. It's like the
Mhm.
information overload. We used to call it like ticket fatigue, right?
Yep.
And so the same things are present. And yeah, so at least I guess CISOs are learning now that having that logging, that centralized monitoring in place is going to be important. And maybe too, like the narrative that we continue to push is there is no easy button security. You can't build a security program with a tool.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Well, and I think that leads really well into the other article we have today is from HelpNet Security. They did a poll, and it found conventional cybersecurity approaches are falling short. So, kind of right in line with, hey, you've got these challenges, and then another separate poll validates that.
Mm-hmm.
They said the 4 cases of most significant breaches reported: human error, misconfiguration, poor maintenance, lack of cyber hygiene, and unknown assets. Well, yeah, I'm not surprised. They do have some stuff in place. There's some good suggestions saying do a risk-based approach using something like the NIST framework. NIST CSF is very good at building that out. Um, so it says, interestingly, 48% of organizations with no breaches in 2021 implemented risk-based cybersecurity management strategies. So uh, what was that at? Attack surface visibility and context, attack simulation, exposure analysis, risk scoring, vulnerability assessments, research or threat intel, and then technology assessments and consolidation. So kind of the basics that we talk about, that they're going, hey, yeah, if you do this, you're going to be in a much better position. Um, but it really interesting read. I think and like I said, it really ties uh, into what that other article was saying of, hey, we don't know what's going on, and yeah, we find that.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And this is an interesting read. I'm surprised in the list of those um, key areas that vendor risk management isn't included there.
I wonder if there, yeah, that would be interesting. I probably should dive into the full report. I could almost see that would be under maybe misconfiguration. You've got a vendor supplied solution that you're not doing properly, and then,
Hmm.
but I don't know. I'd have to look into it.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe
But
they're just including that into the category of
cyber
lack of
hygiene,
hygiene. Yeah.
yeah. So, but this
Yeah.
was 1,200 companies in 16 countries across a wide range of industries. So, kind of just really says what we've been talking about. Take a risk-based, easy for you, risk-based approach. Know what you have, do your asset inventory, and well, we're going to talk about it. I think that's probably a good segue into our main topic for the day.
I think it is. I think that we'll definitely hit on all of those 4 points,
Yeah.
at least somewhat today. And so, like I said, we're not giving you any easy button security because it doesn't exist. We're just going to give you some quick wins and things you should be doing. And it definitely relates to this study here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think we just dig right in. You
Yeah,
know,
let's
I,
do it.
I, I think that for me, the biggest thing we always talk about, like everyone should be doing, the one thing, and there's no one thing, but let's start with this thing, is really understanding your external footprint.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that external footprint is um, what systems are accessible from the internet, what are all of those IP addresses, what ports are available, what services and applications are running on those, and having a good documented inventory of those assets. And then not just saying we're done with the exercise, right? It's really looking at those assets and making an attempt to reduce your
Mm-hmm.
external attack surface,
Yeah.
right? So let's figure out everything that's out there. Let's make sure that's well documented, and let's really review these and see if there's an absolute need for these to be available on the public domain.
Yep, absolutely. The way I explain it to people is, you wouldn't live in a house that you didn't know. if there what doors or windows were there, the quality of them, if there was holes, right? It's same thing. Why are you gonna? This is what's protecting you from the outside. You better make sure it's hardened.
For sure. Yeah. And I see a lot of decisions too people make uh, for putting an asset on the internet or an application on the internet. And then when you really have a conversation with them, like, why is this on the internet? Like, well, we have a remote team who needs to access that application. Okay. What alternatives do you have there? Well, I don't know. Like, let's take that off the internet. Let's put that behind a VPN. You can still allow workability, and you can
Right.
still function and do your job role. However, you're reducing that footprint by
I
putting it
mean,
behind a protected VPN.
perfect example last year, SolarWinds. It
Hmm.
did not need internet access to function.
Yep. Yeah.
And the people that didn't have it exposed didn't get compromised.
Yeah. And to be clear on that one, while that's very important, controlling the egress, right? So
Mm-hmm.
with the
Yeah.
SolarWinds servers, if the egress had been locked down, where that SolarWinds server didn't have untethered access to the internet, it could have never contacted the secondary malicious server to deploy further payloads. Controlling
100%.
that egress is also really, really important. And I think we can go to the Kaseya stuff, right? That's perfect with this example. All of those systems that were impacted by that 0 day last year had public access into the console. If you didn't have that available on the internet, then you would have not been breached
Yep.
or affected by that 0 day. The same thing goes for all these 0 days.
Everything.
When you really think about it, an application. If that application isn't available on public domain, your chances of being exploited reduce significantly.
Right. Yeah, 100%.
Yep. And so, like, maybe even talking to people a little bit about how to do the inventory. I know last week we talked about Nmap, and maybe the first starting point I will say was I see confusion uh, with our clients and just people I talk to. Some people don't even know what their public IP space really is, right? It's not
Yeah.
well documented. So let's start there. Let's make sure you have all those contracts and you understand what IP space you own.
Yep.
And I could tell stories about that, like from being in a corporate world where
Oh, yeah.
it's pretty crazy, like how out of hand that public domain and public space can be if you consume a very large volume of IPs. So
Oh, yeah.
first, let's make sure you know the IPs you own; those are documented. Second, to that, then we're doing regular scanning of those IPs, right? So we're just going to scan those IPs, see what's up, see what's down, see what ports and services are listening, make those risk-based decisions on if they should be available on the internet. And then for the third thing, yeah, this isn't what we're talking about today, but yeah, you need to get into vulnerability assessing and testing those applications to
Yeah.
make sure there are no critical risks present there, and then having a remediation plan for those. But today, we're mainly focusing on let's do the
Learn what you
inventory,
have.
let's know what's there. Yeah,
Yep.
know what's there, and make
Yeah.
true risk-based decisions to determine if they should or should not be available on the public domain.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, how many incidents have we worked where the team has gone, "Hey, what's this IP?" And they're like, "What?
Yeah,
We found this on the
yeah,
outside." Like,
yeah. We see it often, like even um, legacy applications or legacy tools, where a company maybe that was up while they were transitioning to a newer application. They had plans to take that down afterwards. Everybody migrated to the new application. They forgot all about that legacy app still been available on the internet. So we have to
Yep.
continually look at those assets. The flip side too, we see sometimes people make mistakes.
Yep.
And love our network admin teams. But sometimes they'll make a mistake and inadvertently expose ports that don't need to be exposed. And so doing this regular scanning of your external footprint to know what's up, what's changing on a regular basis, will alert
Yeah.
you if you got those legacy apps or if your net admin accidentally turns up port 3389 on your web application server. It's a bad thing. We should probably fix that.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. So the next one leads in, inventory everything. Not just your systems and hardware and software, but know where your data is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, live?
Mm-hmm.
Has Oscar copied everything to 4 different places and you don't know it?
Yep.
Not that you would do that.
Yeah, I would never do that. I mean, maybe I would, but I wouldn't tell anybody.
But, when we talk inventory, though, I mean, I would say probably 90% of the people default to, yeah, I know what all my workstations and servers are, and
Hmm.
I'm running whatever software that grabs what's installed on all of them. Okay, great. What about that last piece?
Hmm.
And and well, let's be honest, that's a difficult part too, because
It is.
if you get
Yeah.
software for it, it's extremely expensive,
Mhm.
and doing it manually is just soul crushing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. It's a lot of work, but and we see there's a um, continual shortfall, I guess, in people being able to achieve this true
Yeah.
inventory and the data inventory specifically. Just like Brad mentioned there, if you're trying to protect your enterprise and your environment, it's really crucial to know where I always call them your crown jewels, right? Where that
Hmm.
private data exists, where your proprietary data exists, where that protected data is throughout your network. Because the same thing like we talk about with an inventory, you can't secure what you don't know is there. Same thing principle applies to your data. You can't secure your data if you don't know where your data lives, right?
Yep.
And then that data inventory will actually drive a lot of other improvements in your information security posture as well, right? Because based
Yep.
on that, we'll know which zones or VLANs or segments of our network we should create. We should treat as high or critical priority, and then that'll bleed into like your backup system, right?
Yep.
Testing your backups, validating your data, monitoring that data for modifications, and all those things. But you got to
Yep.
start with the inventory. If you don't have the inventory, you're never going to get the steps B, C, and D.
Yep. Agreed. And people always ask, like, well, how do I start with data classification? Because we've got 10 years of documents.
Hmm.
Well, start with now.
Hmm.
Anything created from this point forward gets classified, and then create a waiver process that states, and train your staff, anything historical that gets opened needs to be classified when it's accessed.
Hmm.
So you're slowly going to work through that process, and people that access or modify those documents should be the ones that know what it should be classified. So just a little trick there to maybe
Yeah,
you got to start somewhere.
yeah, and that's a great tip too, because when I've socialized this idea with people, it can be an overwhelming task when they have a large volume of data or even a large volume of assets. Um, and so, a lot of times those tasks that are overwhelming just don't get done.
Right.
Uh, but having a process in place, like you mentioned there, where, um, over time you can reach your desired goal, while as in your interim, you're at least making progress toward that, and you can control everything from today forward. I think that's a
Yep.
fantastic tip. Cool. Continuing on, and this is something I'm sure you've heard on here a million times. You've heard on the Hacklebox. You've read in every article, mostly that we've published, but it's MFA everything, multi-factor authentication on everything that you can. And I
Yeah.
will step back to and say, as you're stepping into this, most critical assets are going to be those that are on public domain, so internet accessible, and they have logon capabilities.
Hmm.
I can say today we still see a very, very high volume of our security incidents are a result of lack of multi-factor authentication on public-facing applications. I think everybody knows that. Um, let's just go do that. And I
Yeah.
think, too, we've put out some information on this, but we know that if you aren't doing that today, you're probably working on it, and that's great. And you're likely going to be forced to do it in the future anyway, especially if you're working with cyber insurers.
Yeah.
If you have an insurance plan and your plan requirements haven't changed, they will be changing soon to where they will be requiring multi-factor authentication on all your logins and then validating that as well.
Yeah. And one thing to remember, it's not just implementing multi-factor isn't the silver bullet. You still have to train your staff. I know we've had incidents where they had multi-factor, and the user, even though they weren't even at their computer, okayed the push or whatever the request on their phone that the
Yeah.
attacker did. So train your employees as well.
Yeah, I would say that's a good tip too. And then on top of that, if you aren't required to use push notifications, don't use push notifications. Having an authenticator app like Google Authenticator to
Mhm.
create unique codes for each time you log in that aren't reusable is the better approach there, because just as Brad mentioned, there are a lot of tactics that can be used to overcome push notifications. Users just get in the habit of approving those because they see them. Oh, I use Microsoft and Microsoft's validating it's me. Sure, it's me. I click approve. Also,
Yeah.
users typically start their workday the same time every day, so they're used to that. And attackers know that too, and so it's possible for an attacker to mimic that login time and say, all right, Brad logs in about 8 a.m. in the morning, so I'm going to log in with his harvested creds at 8 a.m. and he'll get 2 push notifications, but he probably won't notice. He'll think it's just the app being silly and approve that. So implement MFA, implement it the right way, and like Brad said, train your users.
Yeah, I just appreciate you think I'm up at 8. No, I'm kidding. Um, Next, logging, log everything, all
Yeah.
the things. And people say, "Well, I don't have money for a SIM." Well, that's fine. Get a log aggregator. Even
Mm-hmm.
if you just aggregate your logs, in the event you have an incident, it's going to make whoever you work with uh, their job so much easier and probably find and contain faster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and specifically, which I don't get why Microsoft doesn't enable it by default, but PowerShell script block. It's super easy to push out with a group policy. It's literally check a box in group policy. And, people say, well, what about space on a workstation? If your users are using PowerShell so much that it's using up their disk space, we got a problem because users should not be running PowerShell.
Yeah, where I see the caveat to that, which I'll pause and back up, like script block logging, yeah, turn that on today. And what that is essentially anytime a script is ran within PowerShell, the full command, the full um, script output will be logged into your PowerShell logs. So it's really fantastic for trying to investigate malicious events that may have utilized PowerShell. And Brad, you're exactly right. Like the end user probably isn't going to be using PowerShell a lot, so it shouldn't be a super noisy log. The one caveat, we do see some MSPs will work and they have
True.
scripts built in for inventory, patch checking, general health conditions that they will run regularly on a workstation. That being said, too, it still shouldn't, jam that log up or create a large volume of data, but it is good to know, like even when you enable this for the first time, if you see those scripts running, gives you the opportunity to go validate, are these
Yeah.
legitimate? Should they be running? Okay, I know these are now allow listed with my MSP, so I can disregard these alerts and tune that out with my aggregator or my SIEM if I have that, or if not, if I'm just manually looking at logs, I know those aren't malicious. So then again, like we always say, know normal and find evil. If you know your normal and your baseline, it's easier to
Yeah.
identify those anomalies as they pop up and exist.
Yeah. Yeah. That baseline
Yeah.
is so critical.
Yeah, and you're right too. Like, and not just the PowerShell logging; it's all logs.
Yeah.
Really, any log that's being generated, you should make sure that you're storing those for an acceptable period of time. Talk to a lot of folks who, you ask them about their log policy, and they really don't know what their log policy is, and it's likely default. And so those default log policies typically are going to be rolling logs. So that log will consume a maximum space on your disk. When that maximum space is achieved, well, then it just deletes the old logs. And so if you're on a noisy domain controller, we see sometimes like you're only storing 3 to 4 hours worth of
Oh,
logs on that domain
I,
controller.
I had one that it was a domain controller that they'd installed a file server and print server on, and it had
Hmm.
3 to 5 minutes of logs.
Right. Right.
Like
And so at
useless.
that point, yeah, if we come in like from a forensic standpoint and we're trying to investigate that server, we're not going to have the evidence that we really need to get started on the investigation. We'll still be able to investigate it, but I'll put it into an example. Instead of it taking us 10 hours for a normal job to identify our malicious log events and trace that back to the attack profile, that 10-hour exercise now probably balloons into a 30 to 40-hour exercise because we're going through very manual efforts to identify the attack pattern. So having those logs is really, really crucial. Um, and so I think, like Brad mentioned, it's you don't have to have the SIEM. You want the SIEM, and you want to be able to tune that SIEM and utilize your SIEM. But if you don't, in the beginning, just make sure you're storing those logs. You have adequate logs, and you're backing them up too.
Yeah.
Include those logs in your backups. Disk space is cheap today. And so even if you just have backup jobs that are, backing up those logs on a daily basis for all your server environment, it's not going to be super expensive.
No. I mean, and there's open source. Like Graylog is a great example. Runs on
Mm-hmm.
Linux. It's open source, and it works really well.
Yep.
You're basically paying for disk space.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and even like Brad had mentioned, it's if you're just aggregating and you want to get to the point where you can monitor those logs and look for
Yes.
anomalies, right? You want to get there, but if you're not today, that's okay. Let's just start with storing the logs, aggregating the logs if you can, and backing those logs up so you have them later if you need
Yeah.
them.
You got to, like we said, got to start somewhere. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
You don't learn to swim by jumping into the deep end.
Yep.
Or you
Yeah,
said,
for sure.
I just knocked things over off my desk.
Brad got stung by a bee.
I know. I had something a book on my desk and I hit it with my elbow.
Yeah, so speaking of backups too, and again, this is going to be a recurring narrative, but while we're on the topic of backing up your logs, PSA, everybody, get your backups offline, right? And there's a lot we could talk about and dissect in a proper backup policy. Not going to do that today. We could have another episode on that and proper rotations and proper retention and all those things. At the end of the day, none of that matters if those backups are network attached and they're destructed by a ransom actor. So get your backups offline. What we mean by that is put them on LTO tapes, put them on hard disks, store those backups offline so they're not network accessible in any way whatsoever. In the event that you do have a full encryption event or incident, you are able to quickly and easily restore your data.
But Oscar, my cloud backup is immutable. It can't be
It's
accessed.
immutable until I get the admin account that
Right.
controls the yeah.
I mean, it is better than nothing. Let's
It
be
is.
honest. But
Yeah.
again, don't think that it's a silver bullet. Unless
Mm-hmm.
it is completely air gapped, it
Yep.
is potentially accessible.
Yep, you're totally right too. Like having, a network-based backup that is immutable storage. It's not using domain credentials. It's a completely unique set of credentials.
Yeah.
Is a layered approach that is more effective than just having network-connected backups on your domain. That's true. That being said, too, if you have a ransom attacker who is skilled and sophisticated enough, as well as being patient enough to wait this out, and we see a lot of them do. They're going to sit back and wait till they can gain access to that immutable storage, learn those administrator credentials, and then be able
There's
to destruct that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's no effort for them to sit and watch.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, and the dwell times are all over the place. I mean, I'm sure we've talked about that. I'm sure everybody's read that in these DFA reports. But dwell can be as small as we've seen them a couple of hours, but we've seen dwell times that were 6, 7, 8 months long
Yep.
before that attacker was in your network for close to a year, just planning that ultimate encryption event.
Yeah, nightmares. And last topic is training your employees. This has got to be a continuous, ongoing thing, and make it fun.
Mm-hmm.
There's some good services out there that are kind of gamify it, or cartoons or animation, but just have fun. One of the funniest things that tricks that I've learned over the years is if you're going to use security posters and you want the most bang for your buck, the back of the bathroom stall door. You have a captive audience. And if you think about it, that's why they have ads in the bathrooms at bars, right?
Yeah.
It actually does work because it's literally in your face.
Yep.
So, but yeah, have fun. Never make it a blame game. If you do a phishing test and somebody fails, hey, it's an education opportunity. That's not these people failed. They got to do extra training and publicly shame.
Yeah, I agree. I like your first point there is like trying to make your training fun. And it all isn't going to be fun, but hopefully everyone is doing, regular information security awareness training.
Yeah.
And I've seen good information security awareness training and I've seen bad information security awareness training. The good is always fun. It's always relatable. There's typically scenarios that are easy for a user to understand. It also clearly defines what a user should do if they are approaching a potential security incident, and it makes it relatable. The bad is the dry slides. It's a PowerPoint. It's a
Right.
deck telling you, here's our policy. Here's the thing to do. No one's going to care. No one's going to pay attention. They're going to sit back, watch YouTube videos, wait for that timer so they can click to the next slide, get
Yep.
through it, and say, yeah, I've done my training. And that's no good for anyone. Doesn't help at
Right.
all. And so looking at like, making your information security awareness training fun and relatable, but then also too, it doesn't always have to be a video someone watches. Like you could have dedicated, Zoom sessions or in-person meetings where you go through the training as a group, you interact, you play out scenarios together. Think of mini tabletops for
Yeah.
your users, right?
One of my customers actually they get, and it kind of leads into the leadership needs to be bought in, right? It's top
Mm-hmm.
down. Well, for their annual training, they put together a skit, and it had leadership playing these different parts, similar to kind of a tabletop like role play, but it was
Yep.
very humorous and got great feedback, and people remembered it's when your CEO comes in and is willingly like, what I clicked that I did, and they,
Yeah.
it kind of admits to what the normal user might do. They're going to go, oh, okay, it's not just me, it's
Yeah.
our leadership. They're taking this seriously. That's awesome. I'm going to do it.
100%. Yeah. It only works. You can only build a culture of security minded individuals when you have top down buy in, right? It
Yep.
takes your leaders practicing what they preach and believing in what they preach and really being able to convey the value of why we are teaching these things and letting everyone at the company understand the effects of that too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I completely agree with that, man. You got to have leaders buy in. You got to practice what you preach, and your folks have to believe that you are bought in and you do
Yeah.
these things too. You know.
Of course, we couldn't have our sales director do that because everybody would be like, yeah, no, that's normal.
Yeah. The
Uh,
the posters though, I do like the posters. I see those at
mhm,
different organizations, and like you said, the bathroom is a great location. In the halls, near elevators, in elevators, right, in cafeterias and break rooms, those are good places to hang those posters. But again, like I think the success of your poster is going to be how do you catch someone's attention with that, right? And so like trying to
mhm,
make those attention grabbing, fun, but also at the same time informative, so people understand. Oh, if I seen this phishing email, what do I do? I report it to here. Who do I call if there's a
mhm.
potential incident? What's the email address? And make sure you're giving them information that they can use. So if they have that potential event they need investigated, they know how to quickly engage.
Yeah, one of my favorite images or slides or posters, whatever you want to say. Passwords are like underpants. Change them often, keep them private, and never share them with anyone. And I include that in almost every presentation and training I do.
Yeah.
And people are like, I don't know if executive. No, we're gonna have fun because
Yeah.
people are gonna remember that
Yeah. That's so
because
funny. Like, yeah, people get all uptight because it's, oh, the executives, how are they going to respond to that? Hey, bro, everybody wears underwear. Let's go. Everybody gets
right,
that analogy.
right.
And we're all human. We're all human. And that's
So
why I think this one is so important, is training our employees, is because we know that we're the weakest link, always have been, always will be. And so why don't we focus on remediating our biggest vulnerability, which is ourselves?
yep, 100%.
Cool. Yeah, so it's been fun. One last thing, I'm just going to throw this out as a PSA too for everybody, and we won't dig into this. One last tip that everybody should be aware of and doing is resetting your Curb TGT password on an annual or semi-annual basis. TGT is an account that's built in. It's used for Microsoft's implementation of Kerberos, which is the default Windows authentication protocol. It's a master account that controls everything. We see in some sophisticated attacks that this account's compromised. We call it the golden ticket attack. When that account is compromised, they can essentially authenticate anywhere you're in your domain, impersonating as any user, or even create up users that don't exist and be able to successfully authenticate with that golden ticket. If that account's compromised, resetting all your passwords and all your sessions isn't going to do anything. The attacker will continue to exist. And so, for all our sysadmins out there, I would say look into that curb TGT reset process. It's something you should be doing for general hygiene. 6 months, preferably. If you can't do it every 6 months, do it at least once a year, and just make sure that you're keeping that sanitized and clean and it's not compromised.
Yep. Good cyber hygiene.
Yeah. Cool. This has been a lot of fun. How about shout outs, Brad? What do you got?
Yeah, so last week I did a shout out to our uh, older staff, or veteran staff, I guess, more tenured. This time I'm gonna just a shout out to all the new people that we've hired so far this year. Everybody, just, I mean, it's phenomenal to see just how quickly they buy in and how quickly they're picking up on stuff, and you
Yeah.
know, it again goes back to the team leads and all that doing a great job, but man, we've gotten some really good people, and I'm really excited to see where they go.
I agree. I think that we've got a fantastic team. The new folks are just incredible that we've been able to bring on board. And like you said, it's really a testament to our leaders. And we buy in here from the top down, like we talk about for our culture, our mission, our values. And you can see that too when we go through that hiring and that onboarding process and find new candidates. You know, it's really difficult sometimes to find those people that are a perfect fit for our mission and what we're doing here. But we work hard. Our leaders and our managers work hard to find those people, and man, they're just knocking it out of the park
Oh
because
yeah,
all of our new folks that we keep onboarding are just incredible people, incredible security professionals and experts.
yep.
Cool. I'm going to give a shout out to my bud, Seth Boland, who's back with the company now. It's fun to be able to let everybody know. But Seth was a pen tester for us for a while. He left for another opportunity. Decided he missed the FRSecure family and wanted to come back. And so he's here helping us stand up and develop our new research and development department. And so he's actually our offensive services R&D lead right now. Super excited to have him back on the team. I'm also super excited about all the things we got in the pipe for our research and development. I think as the year goes on, we'll be able to share a lot more of that with people, but a lot of exciting stuff here happening right now.
I just want to make sure that you and Eric gave him the appropriate amount of "ha ha, told you so."
Well, we have decided he's officially the new guy again, so he's going to go through
Nice.
proper hazing of
Gets to go
sorts when
get
we
all
go to
the
DEF
drinks
CON.
and food,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
I think we're making him be like, the housekeeper, the cook,
Nice,
and he's got to go get all the, groceries and tools and equipment we forgot. So we'll make him do that
perfect.
at DEF CON. All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you soon. See ya.